This is Robert Gleeman with EMR Update. We're talking today with Mark Anderson from the AC Group. Mark's cell phone number is 1-281-413-5572. And our topic today for the Getting Started section is contract terms and conditions to watch out for. So, Mark, you've decided to sign on the dotted line, and it's time to negotiate the contract. How much is negotiable?
Well, it's interesting because depending on the vendor and the size of the practice, there may be a lot of things that you can negotiate. But that is part of the problem, that most vendors are used to having physician offices sign their normal contracts. They're not used to doctors wanting to negotiate much with them. Although we do a lot of negotiations on large medical device purchases, but we don't do enough negotiating on these technology contracts.
The license fees, is that ever negotiable?
The license fees are somewhat negotiable. There's a couple issues you have to think about. One issue on license fees is what is their definition of a provider. So you may be a doctor with a PA and a nurse practitioner. Some vendors may count that as three different providers.
And this is one of the things that you do a lot of, isn't it, Mark?
Yeah, I'd say that the majority of our work really is the contract negotiation. Many of the physician offices will call us up and say, look, I picked this one vendor. We've heard you can help negotiating a better contract for us. About 40 different contract terms need to be either adjusted as an addendum to the contract or actually go back and change the wording of the contract to better protect the practice.
Can you tell me what is the most negotiable and what is the least negotiable?
Well, I think there's a couple that you need to negotiate no matter what. In other words, if they're not willing to negotiate with you, you should walk away from the deal. And the highest ones really are all about support. The number one priority always has got to be, I got to make sure this product is working effectively. And if it's not working effectively, the vendor needs to make it so it will work in my time frame, not their time frame. And that's probably the biggest areas negotiating the support contract and what happens if the vendor does not provide the adequate support that you were expecting. Those need to be negotiated right off the top.
Included in that part of the negotiation of support, would you include in that how you will receive updates, new versions, patches, etc.?
Yes, because it's very important that you stay as current as you can on the products, because there's always new regulation coming out, might be state or national requirements, or just upgrades to the product. The challenge you also run into is most of the vendors, if you pay your support fee, they will provide you an upgrade. But what is the definition of an upgrade? They add something new to it, they call it a new product. So you really need to define what is a new product versus an upgrade. And then, is there any testing of those upgrades?
Do you find the vendors are willing to state assurances and state what their escalation policies are and problem resolution policies? Are they willing to do it?
Some of the larger vendors are willing to do that because they've already established those escalation policies that are out there. Many of the small vendors have never even heard of this kind of stuff.
If a vendor goes out of business or is acquired, is it reasonable in the contract to ask for some kind of a source code escrow clause?
Yes, well, actually it's two ways. So if another vendor buys out the software product, your contract should stay in effect for at least the next 5 to 7 years. And that needs to be a contract addendum in there. What you don't want to have happen is somebody buys out your EMR product and then they stop supporting it because they want you to switch to something else. Same thing is if the company goes out of business, you want to have a clause in there that you can give access to the source code, which is called an escrow account. It's important, too, that if the practice gets sold, that you're able to transfer that license to the buying new company.
You've mentioned before, Mark, that some of these contracts are very one-sided in favor of the vendor. Can you ever work it out with the vendor to have milestone payments at key phases?
Well, we've done on every one of our contracts, no matter who the vendor is. You always pay something up front to buy it. You pay another percentage once the product is installed and somewhat usable. You pay another percentage once your staff are fully trained on how to use the product. And they typically don't make the final payment until 30 or 90 days after go live. I want to
seems like a long process. How long should you expect this to take?
Well, if you have never negotiated a technology software contract with, escalating costs, it will take a physician a long time. I mean, it could take you 2 or 3 weeks to negotiate all of the different points that are out there if you've never done one before. A lot of practices will give their contract over to their lawyers, and lawyers are very good at going through this and looking at the periods and the commas to make sure everything is legal, but most of them are not that strong on technology software contracts.
You told me once a while back how many of these contracts you've negotiated. Do you recall?
Well, I'd say since 2000, we've probably done about 600 contracts, actually negotiation. Although we've done a lot more where the practice came to us afterwards and said, things are not working. Can you help us get out of the contract? And that's when we go back and look at the contract and say, this is a strong contract. You have no out clauses at all. One of the most important factors of contracts is making sure the product meets your requirements. Too many times the doctors will say, gee, can your product do this? And the vendor says, sure, we can do it someday for some cost, but it may not be in your cost proposal. We have a lot of our clients have actually added additional functionality they want built into their product over the next 12 months. And we've gotten the vendors to sign off that they will add additional functionality to their products within a period of time, or the client, the physician practice, gets a rebate on the software.
Should a doctor request from a vendor to look at the contract before even making a decision to buy that software?
I think part of the selection process always is while you're looking at the software originally, you should be getting a copy of an estimated quote on the cost and then the actual contract wording to review. I've seen contracts come in where the doctor signs and they get hit with 50% more cost, things that they didn't realize were there. They were in the contract, but they're fine print or if this and this or escalations of cost. They don't really realize how much more they might be paying for something that they thought that was going to be included in the actual software cost.
This can be one of the most important contracts a doctor ever negotiates, can't it?
It probably is the most important, because if you think about the electronic medical record, your billing system and everything, it's running of your business. And if it goes bad and you're not able to generate the right notes, the right bills, you don't get paid.
Now, one thing I know that you try to do is make your fee transparent. In other words, save the doctor enough money to cover your fee. Are you usually able to do that in helping negotiate a contract?
We have found on average that depending on the size of the practice, you get a X times reduction in cost that more than overcompensates for our costs. Example would be is we found practices with over 50 doctors having saving 9 times our cost. For 1 and 2 doctor practices, there's not a lot of cost. There's not a lot you can negotiate, but we're still saving about 3 to 4 times our cost.
Is there a red flag that you should be looking for when you negotiate these contracts?
The biggest red flag would be is when they send you a purchase order with almost no terms and conditions built in. The small physician practice, the 1, 2, and 3 doctor practice, should be requiring the vendors to provide not only a purchase order or a contract fee, but true terms and conditions. Terms and conditions will be at a minimum of 8 to 12 pages long, in small print, too.
And any final warnings to the readers of EMR Update, Mark?
It's always buyer beware in all these things. I think there's a number of vendors that participate in EMR Update that have very good contracts out there. A couple of ones I've negotiated in the past, there's only 2 or 3 terms we need to have changed on there. Other vendors, we've added 20 or 30 pages of changes to their contracts, but you don't want to make the wrong decision and sign the wrong contract.
We're talking with Mark Anderson from the AC Group. Thanks again, Mark.
Thank you.